In a world where the shadows of the ego blend with the light, and the noise of thought drowns out the voice of the soul, there exists a truth beyond time, beyond dogma, beyond everything we've been taught. It is the living truth of the consciousness of Christ. We are not speaking of a historical figure, nor of a religion, nor of an imposed belief. We speak of a latent force within you, a divine spark that needs no temples, no rituals, no permission. A presence that whispers in silence, that heals without touch and guides without demand. This is not an ordinary text, it is a key and a calling, a map back home. Emmet Fox, mystic, teacher and visionary, invites us to dive into the deep waters of the Spirit. He teaches us not to worship Christ as a distant idol, but to embody Christ as living consciousness. To live not from the mind nor from fear, but from the source. Prepare yourself, and not to listen, but to awaken. Not to understand, but to remember who you are. Welcome to the consciousness of Christ. Welcome to yourself. There is no deeper need in the human soul than to remember its origin. I'm not speaking of an intellectual memory or an emotional nostalgia, but of a living reactivation of the being that lies behind every mask, beyond every name, before every thought. In the mind of Christ, we expose the fundamental principle that thought must align with the Spirit for the soul to find peace, purpose, and power. There, we began to train the mind to think as God thinks, but now we must go further. Beyond thinking as Christ, we must live as Christ, not imitating his external life, but embodying his inner consciousness. We must not seek God as an object, but recognize ourselves as a living extension of his being. Christ is not a historical figure nor a theological symbol. Christ is a frequency, a consciousness, a presence, an eternal vibration that dwells in every soul as an unalterable seed. This work is a call to allow that seed to germinate, grow, and become the tree of life from which everything is revealed with clarity. Living from the consciousness of Christ is not a mystical exaltation reserved for a few. It is the inevitable destiny of every soul that grows weary of the conflict, the illusion of the self, the emotional wave, and desires to finally embrace the stillness that is beyond understanding. It is no longer about adjusting negative thoughts or training oneself in correct affirmations. It is about surrendering the entire mind so that silence can speak, so that the eternal word that was with God and was God can take form in you. At this point on the path, an inescapable truth arises. It is not about changing the world. It is about ceasing to inhabit the world created by the ego, and remembering that there is another, the only real one, the one that is not subject to time, the one that does not oppose anything, the one that is one. The consciousness of Christ does not react, does not judge, does not defend itself, does not seek to prove anything, does not wait. It simply is. And in its presence, everything is ordered because its very vibration is authority. Its existence is enough to reveal the truth. This work is not a manual, it is a mirror without form, without time, without effort. It will not give you formulas to reach the kingdom. It will show you that you never left it. And from that recognition, the soul will cease to strive to be holy and will begin to remember that it has always been whole, not by merit, but by origin. Here, you will not learn to use God as a tool. You will learn to stop using the self as an obstacle. Here, it is not about improving your story. It is about gently dissolving it in the light so that what you truly are can finally be lived without interruption. Nothing of what you are in Christ has been lost. It has only been veiled, and this book is a hand that removes that veil, not with violence, but with certainty, not with anxiety, but with reverence. Because what has been waiting for you is not outside. It is within you, silent, unalterable, waiting for you to stop searching and begin to dwell. Then we will make no more requests. We will only affirm, I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. And in this moment, only what God is exists, and that is who I am. The consciousness of Christ is not attained, it is remembered. And in this book we will remember the consciousness of Christ, living from the source, not from the self. By Emmet Fox. We have noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1, Beyond Right Thinking, Living from the Being. The one who remains in me and I in him bears much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus of Nazareth. There comes a point in the spiritual journey where positive thinking is no longer enough. There is a moment when repeating truths no longer transforms, because the soul senses that the problem is not in the ideas it holds, but in who it believes itself to be, the one who holds them. This is that point. For a long time, we have trained the mind to correct its course. We have replaced the narrative with affirmations of good. We have watched our words, disciplined our emotions, chosen higher thoughts, and all of that has been useful. But if consciousness does not take the next step, transformation stagnates, because thinking well is not the same as living from the being. You can think of love and still feel separated. You can affirm abundance and continue vibrating in need. You can declare unity and still judge from the identity of the self. Because correct thinking alone is not enough. Only when thought arises from the being, from the consciousness of unity with God, does it carry the creative power of truth. Jesus did not think rightly to create miracles. He lived from the consciousness of Christ, from the indivisible, non-dual being. He didn't need to convince himself that something was possible. He knew that nothing real could be absent, and from that state he spoke, decided, and acted, not as one seeking a connection, but as one who knew that he was never disconnected. The difference is total. Correct thinking seeks to change what it perceives. Thought from the being recognizes what has always been. One struggles, the other reveals. This is what it means to live from the inner Christ. It is not about modifying your inner dialogue to feel better. It is about undoing the belief that you are a separated God who needs to improve. It is about looking from the eternal, from the already fulfilled, from what needs no justification. As long as thought is guided by the ego, even a spiritual ego, it will remain limited. It may sound good, it may bring temporary results, but it cannot sustain true peace, because peace does not arise from thought. It arises from the being, and the being is God in you, not as an idea but as the only reality. Living from the being does not mean thinking less, but thinking from a different place, not from memory but from presence, not from reaction but from vision, not from the desire to control, but from the certainty that everything is contained in the aura. And how do you get there? Not by fighting, not by perfecting the self, but by surrendering it, gently, deeply, honestly. When you stop using the mind to manufacture results and allow the spirit to think through you, everything changes. You no longer create from form. You allow the essence to express everything through you. This is living from the being, not as an occasional state of meditation, but as a constant identity, not as effort, but as sacred rest in what you already are. Be silent, close your eyes, and do not try to think well. Just remember, what I am does not need to be fixed. What I am is not incomplete. What I am is already one with God, and from there my life is revealed. You no longer need so many affirmations. One is enough when it comes from the being. I am. And from that I am, everything else finds its place, not because you organize it, but because order is the nature of the being when it is finally recognized. Chapter 2. Christ is not a figure, he is a frequency. Before Abraham was, I am. Jesus of Nazareth. For centuries, the name of Christ has been wrapped in theological garments, loaded with symbols, worshipped from a distance, and debated from creeds. He has been painted in temples, named on altars, and defined in treatises, yet few have experienced his true nature. Christ is not a historical figure, but an eternal frequency. Jesus embodied that frequency, lived it, expressed it without interruption, but did not possess it exclusively. He did not come to say, "Worship me." He came to say, "What I am, you also are." And that is the stone that many have rejected, that Christ is not a proper name, but a vibration that dwells in every being, waiting to be recognized, activated, and lived. The consciousness of Christ is a state of the soul, not a religious faith, not a sacred lineage, not an ancient story. It is the highest vibration possible in human consciousness, the point where the ego completely silences itself and truth becomes the only voice. To say Christ is to say humility, presence, non-duality. It is to look at the world without separation, to think without judgment, to live without defense, to act without a personal agenda, to be without the need to represent anything. The error has been to take Christ as a figure and not as a state, admiring the messenger and forgetting the message, creating distance from what is truly your deepest identity. Christ is not a body, not a cross, not a doctrine. He is a frequency, a pure, silent, firm, and loving vibration that already resides within you. It does not need to be created. It only needs you to clear everything else so that it can take the throne of your consciousness. How do you recognize this frequency? Not by emotions, not by mystical experiences, but by the state of presence, by the inner attitude that needs no proof, by the clear vision that does not judge, but understands, by the peace that does not depend on what happens, by the love that demands no return. This is the frequency of Christ, and it is active now, not when you finish your process, not when you clean your mistakes, not when you understand all the spiritual books, but only when you stop seeking Jesus outside and begin to see Christ within. This is not irreverence, it is total reverence. Honoring Jesus is not repeating his name, it is replicating his consciousness. He did not come to be idolized, he came to be remembered within you. And when this frequency becomes your foundation, everything else falls into order. Thought becomes clear, the body responds to peace, relationships cease to be struggles, time becomes eternal because you no longer dwell in form but in essence. From there is no rush, no lack, no noise, only clarity, only certainty, only I am. Be silent, not to seek something, but to make space for what has always been. And in the depths, I am not the character, I am not the past, I am not the story. I am the frequency of Christ recognizing itself in me, and stay there. Do not think about it, inhabit it. Do not explain it, live it, because when the frequency of Christ is your base state, there is nothing left to attain, only to manifest what you already are. Chapter 3. From Awakening to Permanence, How to Dwell in the Spirit Without Interruption. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine, no more can ye except ye abide in me. Jesus of Nazareth. Awakening is a sacred moment, a moment of clarity in which the mind opens, the heart expands, and the soul remembers, if only for a second, what it truly is. It is like a flash of lightning that cuts through the darkness of conditioned thought and reveals the face of God in all things. But that moment, no matter how beautiful, is not the destination, it is only the door. Many have had moments of awakening, have felt the unity, have understood love, have seen with the clear eye, but then sometimes in minutes, sometimes in days, they return to the noise, the division, the same old struggle. Why does this happen? Because awakening is not yet permanence. The ego does not fear an occasional glimpse, but it trembles at a consciousness that stabilizes. Dwelling in the Spirit is the true path. Not touching the light from time to time, but living from it without interruption. Not remembering your truth only in meditation or in reading, but holding it in the midst of traffic, in the uncomfortable conversation, in the formless moment. And this is not achieved by effort. It's not about trying harder. It's about letting go deeper, about stopping the oscillation of I-spirit, do-spirit, and establishing Christ consciousness as the only base, not as a special state, but as the natural state. Jesus did not reconnect with the Father. He remained because he did not live from a spiritualized ego, but from the undivided being. He did not have to remember his humility, because there was no way for him to forget it. This is the destiny of every awakened soul, to transition from occasional access to presence to the stability of being. How does this transition happen? It doesn't happen as a sudden leap. It happens as a constant re-education of the focus of attention. Every time you return to the present moment, without history, without judgment, without name, you are cultivating permanence. Every time you choose to see from the Spirit, even though the ego cries out, you are affirming, I no longer return to the old I remain in the truth, even though I don't understand, even though I don't feel, even though I don't see. And this fidelity to the present moment is what deepens the anchoring until the Spirit is no longer visited, but inhabited, until practice becomes nature, until you no longer have to remember who you are because there is no forgetting. This does not mean that old thoughts won't arise, but they will no longer have roots. They will come as echoes, and you will see them pass like clouds in a sky that can no longer be covered. To remain is not to isolate yourself. It is to be fully in the world without being confused by it. It is to wash the dishes from eternity. It is to walk from peace. It is to speak without weight. It is to look with the clear eye, even when others still cannot. And that remaining is the fruit of true awakening, not what happens in a mystical moment, but what is cultivated in the day-to-day, in the everyday, in the invisible, in the subtle. Do you want to know if you are remaining? Observe yourself. Are you interpreting from history or from silence? From the I that needs or from the being that already is? Every time you choose presence over reaction, truth over drama, peace over argument, you have remained. And in that moment, Christ in you has again taken the throne. Make remaining your only purpose. Everything else will be added. The body aligns, time adjusts, relationships clarify, decisions flow, because the Spirit doesn't need you to help. It only needs you not to leave. And in that permanence, you don't perform miracles. You are the miracle. You don't transmit light. You become the light. You don't invoke peace. You are the peace that has remembered it was never anything else. And that memory no longer gets interrupted. Chapter 4. The illusory self dissolving the identity fabricated by the world. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. Jesus of Nazareth. There are few teachings more radical, more challenging, and more necessary than this one. Most people want to improve their lives, but not transform their identity. They seek peace without abandoning the struggle, truth without surrendering their ideas, light without letting go of the darkness. But there is a narrow gate through which no one can pass while carrying the idea they have of themselves, and that gate is the dissolution of the self. The self we cling to is not the I am of the Spirit. It is a construct, an image shaped by the world, reinforced by personal history, fed by comparison, and protected by the memory of pain. It is the self that says, "This is what I am, this is what happened to me, this is what I need." And as long as this self guides life, true freedom is not possible because that self is the veil, and the veil prevents us from seeing the face of Christ. Jesus did not come to decorate the self. He did not come to polish it, elevate it, or spiritualize it. He came to dissolve it. He came to show that what the world calls identity is nothing more than a fiction sustained by fear, a defense crafted to survive in a world that has forgotten who it is. And his calling was clear. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. What does this mean in the consciousness of the Spirit? It means renouncing your personal idea, letting go of the image, stopping living from the mask, and allowing the real being, the Christ within you, to take the place it rightfully occupies. This is not self-annihilation, it is self-revelation, because only when the false identity dissolves can the eternal identity emerge, and that identity does not need to defend itself, does not need to be right, does not need to achieve anything, it simply is. Who are you when you are not defined by your name, your story, your body, your occupation, your wounds, or your accomplishments? Who remains when all titles, labels, and memories that you believe compose you fall away? What remains is God living in you. That is Christ, that is the I am. That is what you have always been, but did not know, because the illusory self occupied the stage. The illusory self is noisy. It speaks a lot, always defending its position, justifying its actions, seeking validation. It has a constant hunger for recognition. It lives comparing itself, feeling superior or inferior, but never at peace, because its foundation is not love. It is fear. And fear can only fabricate identity. It cannot remember the truth. That is why the false self is always changing, unstable, contradictory, fragile. It needs to construct and reconstruct its image to feel secure. But the soul knows that security is temporary. And as long as you identify with that version of yourself, you will keep walking in circles. The illusory self is not your enemy. It is a mechanism, a temporary structure of thought formed to give you continuity in the world. But there comes a moment when it no longer serves, when it is no longer necessary, and if it is not let go, it becomes a prison. That moment has come. Christ consciousness cannot flourish in a soul identified with the character. Truth cannot be revealed through a mind that still needs to be right. That is why the spiritual path is not about improving yourself. It is the end of the self as the center. It is the birth of being as the only truth. How is the illusory self dissolved? First, with recognition. You cannot undo what you have not yet seen. You need to observe yourself without judgment, recognizing when you speak from the character, when you decide from the wound, when you act from the need to protect an image. And by observing without condemning, the self begins to lose its power because it feeds on reaction, but cannot survive in the light of consciousness. Second, with surrender. You cannot hold on to your idea of yourself and simultaneously hold on to the light of the Spirit. Sooner or later, one must give way, and surrender is not defeat, it is liberation. Surrender to the truth. Say to the Spirit, show me who I am without this story, without this name, without this defense, without this habit of suffering. Show me my true face, the one I had before the world told me who I should be. Third, with permanence. It's not about having moments of clarity. It's about dwelling in the truth as your only identity. And when the self tries to return, do not feed it. Observe it as an old reflection you no longer need. Do not repress it or deny it. Simply say with loving firmness, thank you for what you were, but now Christ lives in me, and he is my only identity. Fourth, with presence. The only way not to return to the illusory self is to live fully in the aura. The character only exists in psychological time, in the past, which repeats, and in the future, which fears. But in the now there is no character, there is only being, only truth, only God. Make this a living practice. Upon awakening, do not resume your story. Resume your being. Before speaking, ask yourself, who is speaking, the self or the spirit? Before deciding, ask, from where am I deciding, from the image or from unity? And little by little, what once dominated you will no longer have power. The self will become an instrument, not a master, a reflection, not a center. And Christ, your only real identity, will become your way of seeing, your way of thinking, your way of living. This is freedom, not doing whatever you want but being who you are. And who you are needs nothing because it is everything. This is the revealed mystery. Lose your life and you will find it. Lose your story and you will discover your origin. Lose your character and you will discover that God never left. He was only waiting for you to release the disguise so he could embrace you as light. Chapter 5. Everything that is not eternal is illusion, the power of discernment. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Jesus of Nazareth. There is an infallible measure that allows every soul to discern between what is true and what is false, between what should be held and what should be let go. It is a silent rule, a compass of light for the spiritual traveler. Everything that is not eternal is illusion, and everything that is illusion, no matter how brilliant it seems, no matter how strong it feels, no matter how necessary you judge it, has no real substance. The soul that desires to live from the consciousness of Christ, not as a fleeting experience, but as a permanent installation in truth, must sharpen its spiritual discernment, not to judge the world, but to avoid being deceived by it. And this discernment is not achieved through intellect, but through the vibration of being that effortlessly recognizes what is eternal and does not confuse itself with the appearances of the transient. What is real does not deteriorate, does not change with the seasons, does not contradict itself. What is real does not need to be defended, does not demand, does not impose, does not shout. What is real remains, and its nature is as firm as it is invisible. Illusion, on the other hand, fluctuates. It has a beginning and an end. It appears in consciousness and disappears. It has form but no substance. It imposes itself but does not stay. It is brilliant for moments but lacks root, and although it may seem useful, illusion always leads to fatigue, attachment, and suffering because the soul has confused it with what is real and has placed its faith in what cannot sustain it. Jesus did not live from illusion. That is why he was free. He could be among crowds but not get lost in them. He could speak with kings or beggars and see the same, the face of God. He could face betrayal, loneliness, the cross, without losing his center because he did not dwell in time. He dwelled in eternity, and from there he discerned, spoke, and acted. This is what is expected from the soul that wishes to mature in the spirit, to stop living reacting to what appears and begin responding from what remains. How is this discernment developed? First, through conscious observation. Everything that troubles you today, will it be eternal? Will it exist in 5 years, in 100, in eternity? Does it have its root in God, or is it only in the desire of the self? If it is not eternal, let it pass. Do not hold on to it, do not carry it. This is the principle of liberation for the soul. It is not about solving every illusion, but about ceasing to feed it with your attention. Attention is your creative energy, and where you place it, you create relative reality. But if you direct it to the eternal, to silence, to love, to presence, then you begin to vibrate with the kingdom, and the kingdom does not need to be created, it only needs to be remembered. Second, through spiritual sincerity, the soul must want to see the truth more than be right, more than have momentary peace, more than win, more than succeed in the world's terms. Because if you are not willing to let go of illusion, you will remain a prisoner of what is not, and you will live in a circle where form changes, but the essence remains the same: confusion, fatigue, division. Third, through the practice of detachment. It is not about renouncing everything, it is about not identifying with anything. You have a body, but you are not the body. You have thoughts, but you are not the mind. You have roles, but you are not the character. You have emotions, but you are not the one who reacts. You are the silent witness that has never changed. You are the space in which everything happens, but is not dependent on what happens. You are Christ recognizing himself beyond form. This discernment does not separate you from the world, it frees you in it. You no longer walk as someone who protects themselves, but as someone who observes. You do not react with urgency because you know that what changes is not what you are, and what you are cannot be threatened. That is why Jesus could say, "The prince of this world comes, and he has nothing in me," because he had nothing in common with the illusory. He had no roots in fear or desire or form. His identity did not depend on what the world could give him or take from him. Do you want to live in that freedom? Then ask yourself this question in every decision, every relationship, every thought: is this eternal or is it illusion? Does this come from Christ in me or from the character? Does this expand me or contract me? Does this bring peace or demand effort? Is this truth or a momentary form? And by answering honestly, you will discover that much of what you thought was important was shadow, echo, mist. But behind the mist, the sun has always been there, and that sun is your being. When the soul learns to discern what is real, drama dissolves, the search ends, need transforms into presence, and what seemed like a fragmented life becomes an expression of unity. Not because everything has changed on the outside, but because you have returned to what does not change. This is the power of discernment, not rejecting the world, but seeing it as it is, and not confusing yourself with it. Walking through it without belonging to it. Loving without attachment. Giving without fear, receiving without guilt. Because when you recognize that only the eternal is real, you no longer build castles in the sand. You no longer fear the wind. You no longer weep for what passes, because you are anchored in what will never pass, and that which does not change, does not die, does not lack, does not fear. That is you. That is God in you. That is Christ. Everything else passes, and you who can now discern remain with what remains, and from there you live. Chapter 6. Seeing from the Absolute. Do not judge according to appearances, but judge with righteous judgment. Jesus of Nazareth. There is a silent, profound, and definitive transformation that occurs in the soul when it stops interpreting life from the perspective of its wounds. It is the moment when the veil tears, when one no longer looks from the past, nor from the emotion of the moment, nor from the personal narrative. It is the moment when the soul learns to see from the absolute, and in doing so, what once seemed like a problem no longer is. What seemed like an offense dissolves. What seemed like a threat reveals itself as an instrument. Because everything depends on where it is seen from, and while it is seen from the wound, the world will be a mirror of fear. The wound interprets, the wound filters, the wound projects, and what is seen is not the truth, but a distortion. The wounded person does not see the other as they are, but as they believe they must protect themselves from. They do not listen to words, they listen to their memory. They do not perceive the present. They see the past disguised as an aura. And thus, a personal reality is created in which everything becomes reaction, defense, and fatigue, because the soul is not dwelling in what is, but in what was, and while what was remains the filter, the soul cannot enter the kingdom, for the kingdom is not made of interpretation, but of vision. And vision is only possible from the Absolute. What is it to see from the Absolute? It is to see with the eyes of Christ. It is to see beyond form, beyond behavior, beyond the emotion that the moment generates. It is to see from the place where all is complete, where there is no lack, no guilt, no separation. Jesus saw in this way, which is why he could look at a tax collector and see an apostle. He could look at a woman rejected by everyone and see purity. He could see the paralytic not as a burden but as an opportunity to manifest good. He was not interpreting, he was seeing. And the one who sees from the absolute heals, not with technique, but with presence. This is the secret of the true miracle. It does not happen through effort, but through alignment, and there is no higher alignment than that which happens when you no longer see from yourself, but from God. But to reach this point, the soul must be willing to leave behind something it has believed to be indispensable. Its story. The story of the wounded self, the self that was ignored, betrayed, repressed, misunderstood. This story has served for a time. It was shield, identity, and explanation. But the moment comes, the sacred moment, when the soul hears the inner voice that says, "You no longer need that story. You are not what happened to you. You are what I am in you," and from there you can see. When you stop interpreting from the wound, you become a clean channel. You no longer project your shadow onto others. You no longer speak from emotion. You no longer act from the need to protect an image. You simply see, and in seeing you understand, and in understanding you free. This is not indifference. It is clarity. This is not coldness. It is real compassion. Because the one who sees from the absolute sees the other as they truly are, not as they behave, but as an expression of the same God that dwells in you. From that vision, judgment ceases, not because you approve of everything, but because you understand that what does not come from love is forgetfulness. And the one who forgets is not condemned. They are reminded by your presence, by your vision, by your non-reaction. This is the power that arises when the soul rises. It no longer participates in the drama because it no longer vibrates at that frequency, not because it feels superior, but because it has remembered that its origin is not in time, and what is not in time cannot be hurt. To see from the absolute is to live from the eternal now, not from what the mind fears, nor from what the body feels, but from the presence that remains, from the part of you that does not age, does not fragment, does not need to prove anything, and from there everything becomes clear, not because things change on the outside, but because you no longer see them as before. You have stepped out of the cycle of interpretation and entered the flow of pure vision, the Christic vision, that does not seek reason but truth. This is living with the eyes of the Spirit. You do not reach there in one leap. You reach it through surrender. Every time the ego wants to interpret, you pause, breathe, and say within, "Holy Spirit, show me how to see this. I do not want to understand, I want to see." And then the veil falls, the form softens, the tension releases, and the situation that seemed like conflict becomes an opportunity, a mirror, a step. This is what Christ in you desires. Not that you solve life, but that you see it from the place that has already solved everything. Not that you overcome the world, but that you transcend it. As the Master said, "I have overcome the world." And how did he do it? By seeing from the absolute. Make this your practice. You do not need to change the world, you only need to change where you see it from. And by doing so, you are no longer the one who reacts, but the one who reveals. You are no longer the one who repeats, but the one who remembers. And from that vision, the kingdom is no longer a promise, but becomes your constant experience. Because the kingdom is not entered through explanations, it is entered through vision. And that vision is only possible when you stop seeing from the wound and begin to see from the absolute. Chapter 7. The transformed shadow, integrating without identifying. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. Jesus of Nazareth. There is no real spiritual growth without encountering the shadow. The soul that desires to live from Christ, that wishes to inhabit the kingdom without interruptions, must pass through the most feared threshold by the ego, the inner mirror where the denied fragments of the self appear. The dilemma has never been that the shadow exists, but that it is judged, repressed, rejected, or worse, confused with who one is. The ego fears the shadow, but the awakened soul embraces it completely without identifying with it. The shadow is not evil, it is simply accumulated unconsciousness. It is the part of the mind that has not been illuminated by truth, the inner corner where there are still unrecognized memories, inherited beliefs, repressed emotions, false ideas about God, about oneself, and about the world. And all of that, though hidden, influences, operates, projects, and creates. Because what is unrecognized in the mind ends up appearing in life not to punish, but for you to look at it with new eyes and transform it through the light. Jesus never denied the existence of the shadow in people, but he never identified with it. He saw fear, envy, judgment, betrayal, and responded from a place where there was no reaction, but vision. He understood that the shadow was not the being but the forgetting of the being, and that is why, in his presence, the shadows of others began to dissolve, not because he fought them, but because his light offered no resistance. And where there is no resistance, the shadow does not survive. Do you want to know if you still live from the identification with the shadow? Observe yourself. Do you react with disproportionate force to certain events? Do you decide before understanding? Do you feel shame for certain thoughts or emotions that arise? Do you project onto others what you have not allowed yourself to look at in you? Do you see yourself as spiritual and others as trapped? If so, the shadow is still operating. Not as punishment, but as a sacred opportunity to integrate the denied. Integration is not denial. It is not justifying the error. It is looking at the content of the shadow with the eyes of Christ and saying firmly, gently, "This too is me, but I am not only this. This is in me, but it does not define me." And by seeing it, you redeem it, because everything that is looked at with love loses its power over you, and everything that is judged binds you. The transformed shadow becomes wisdom. It becomes compassion, authentic presence, freedom. A soul that has integrated its shadow no longer fears its humanity. It does not idealize it, but it does not reject it either. It knows that the human form is not perfect, but the being that animates it is. And from there, it lives reconciled. It no longer needs to appear good because it is already true. It no longer demands purity without process, because it has learned that light is only complete when it has embraced its root. This does not mean reliving the past. It means stopping fleeing from what still influences from the shadow. For this, the soul must create space, space to feel without dramatizing, to look without identifying, to listen without reacting, to see the ego without feeding it. When the ego feels seen, it loses power. And in that soft surrender, consciousness elevates, and what was once a burden now becomes fuel. Because the integrated shadow transforms into expanded light, and the one who once descended now simply is. Make this a constant practice. Do not flee from what arises. Observe it. Invite your inner Christ to look at it with you, not to blame yourself, but to liberate yourself. Say inwardly, "This is in me, but it no longer dominates me. This was part of my journey, but it is not my essence. I am the light that sees, not the shadow that fears." And stay there, in that act of deep acceptance, without judgment, without defense, without a mask, only you and the truth that holds you. And so, step by step, the shadow transforms and you stop living divided, because the soul that has embraced what was can finally live from what is. And in that being, there is no struggle, only expansion, only peace. Jesus did not come to eliminate the shadow of the world. He came to show that light is not afraid of it, and that you, by remembering who you are, can do the same, not from force, but from vision, not from guilt, but from grace, not from the ego, but from Christ. And at that point, the shadow is no longer an enemy. It is a teacher. It is part of the path. It is the shell that falls away so that the light of the kingdom becomes your only identity. And so at last you begin to live whole, not as someone who represses, but as one who no longer divides themselves. And from that unity, everything you touch transforms too. Chapter 8. Silence as authority, governing from inner stillness. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Isaiah 53:7. There are two types of authority in the world, one that is imposed from the outside and one that emanates from within. One needs to speak loudly, convince, demonstrate, defend its position. The other needs to say nothing because its power does not come from noise but from silence. The soul that has remembered its unity with God no longer needs to react in order to assert itself. It does not seek to control others, correct every mistake it perceives, or constantly explain itself. It simply remains, and in that remaining, the world is ordered around it, not because it has dominated, but because it has remembered the center. Jesus lived this way. In the face of accusation, he remained silent. In the face of provocation, he remained unperturbed. In the face of judgment, he did not respond from the wound, but from the truth that does not need to defend itself. Why? Because Christ consciousness does not seek to be right, it seeks to reveal reality. And that is not achieved with words, but with presence, with silence, with a stillness so deep that all falsehoods disarm before it. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is presence without interruption. It is the state in which the soul no longer feels the need to intervene in the flow of life, because it has stopped identifying with what occurs. It no longer feels dragged by every emotion, nor does it strive to control the details. This knowledge does not come from thought, but from pure consciousness. And from that consciousness, all action is born effortlessly. Every word is measured, and every pause has purpose, because inner silence has replaced the noise of the ego. In the spiritual path, many seek to speak with authority. They want to have the truth, share teachings, transmit wisdom. But if the soul has not first entered into silence, its words, though correct, lack root. They are repetition, not revelation. They are form, not substance. And the world does not need more voices. It needs presence. It needs souls who govern from the center, not from noise, from quiet, not from agitation. This is what Jesus modeled, an authority that was not imposed but that transformed, that did not shout but disarmed every argument. When we say that Christ spoke with authority, it does not refer to tone or posture. It refers to the fact that his words were an extension of his inner silence and therefore carried the power of the Spirit. You are called to do the same. You do not need to be the wisest, the most eloquent, or the most prepared. You only need to remember who you are in God, and from there, remain silent. Because the silence of Christ within you is worth more than 1,000 well-spoken words. This silence is not passivity, it is vibration. It is an energetic field. It is the resonance of the kingdom. When a soul has reached this depth, it no longer responds from the wound. It no longer explains its vision to validate itself. It no longer corrects from judgment. Its mere presence, its mere gaze, its mere stillness are sufficient correction. They are medicine. They are direction. And this is only achieved when the soul has made silence its dwelling, not as a technique but as nature. How does one inhabit this silence? First, by abandoning urgency. Urgency always comes from the ego. It wants to resolve quickly, explain soon, act without space. But truth has no hurry. Truth waits for the exact moment, and in the meantime it remains in silence, not out of indifference, but out of wisdom. Second, by releasing the need to be understood. The immature soul wants the world to understand its path. It wants to be validated, confirmed, approved. But Christ within you already knows that it does not need defense, because what is real does not need to be understood. It only needs to be lived. Third, by making silence a daily practice. Stop, create space, breathe. Let go of thoughts, not to eliminate them, but to not believe them. Listen to the presence behind the thought. Listen to the being that does not need words to know itself as eternal. From that place, everything you do will be right. Not because you planned it, but because the Spirit will direct it. Your actions will be born from silence, and that is why they will carry authority. Your voice will echo the silence, and that is why it will be heard. And if no one listens, you will remain at peace, because you no longer do anything to be seen. You only do because it flows from within. This is true spiritual governance, not one that controls from the outside, but one that radiates from within. And that governance does not need force because there is no opposition. It does not need argument because truth does not compete. It only establishes itself in the soul that has made silence its throne. Make this your practice. Upon waking, do not immediately seek to know what to say, what to do, what to resolve. First, seek to inhabit the center. Enter the sanctuary of silence. There lies your true authority. When you do, you will discover something wonderful, that many things you thought you had to fix no longer need intervention. Because from silence, life corrects itself. Relationships clarify, decisions are revealed. The body aligns, time arranges itself, not because you did something, but because you stopped interfering. And that is what silence grants. Authority without imposition, power without pressure, leadership without effort, presence without strain. This is what it means to govern from inner stillness. It is not to disengage from the world, but to see it from the place where everything is already in order. Because only one who has made silence their home can walk through the world without being trapped by it. And in that walking, the light that does not speak reveals everything. Chapter 9. Christ did not come to change the world, but to reveal another. My kingdom is not of this world. Jesus of Nazareth. One of the most persistent confusions in human consciousness is the belief that Christ came to improve the world we know, that his mission was to correct social systems, refine collective morality, or establish new, more just external structures. But this is an interpretation from the ego, from the mind that has not yet understood that the kingdom Jesus spoke of is not a reform of the world, but a revelation of an entirely different one. Jesus did not come to perfect the world. He came to show that this world, the world of judgment, fear, conflict, and the illusion of separation, is not the real world. And that's why he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." This is not a metaphor. It is a radical statement, a declaration of origin and belonging, an unequivocal sign that Christ consciousness does not manifest to fix the illusion, but to show you that you were not created to dwell in it. This world, as perceived by the senses, is a reflection of a divided mind, a projection of thought that has forgotten its source. It is a fleeting, fluctuating experience subject to time, form, and decay. Nothing here remains, nothing here is whole, and everything that is attempted to be built from the separate self eventually collapses under its own weight. Why does this happen? Because it is not sustained by the principle, but by fear, by struggle, by the illusion of lack. The kingdom that Christ came to reveal is not based on merit, competition, or comparison. It is a kingdom of completeness, of silence, of peace, that does not depend on external conditions. It is a frequency of consciousness, not a geographical place. It is a way of seeing, a way of being, a vibration that transcends the laws of time, because it was not born in time. And here is the core of the teaching. It is not about changing the world. It is about stepping out of its logic, not confronting it, but ceasing to validate it as the supreme reality. Jesus did not fight against the political system of his time. He did not organize revolts. He did not demand justice from resentment. He walked through this world knowing that he belonged to another, and that certainty was his authority. That's why he did not react. That's why he could love without asking for anything in return. That's why he could train his body without losing his peace. Because his root was not in the form, but in the essence. This is what the awakened soul must understand if it wants to live in Christ consciousness. As long as you believe that your function is to improve this world, you will be trapped in it. And you will suffer its rejection, its injustice, its lack of response. You will be frustrated by its slowness, its contradictions, its incoherence. Because deep down, you will still be expecting this world to confirm to you what can only be revealed by the kingdom. The world cannot give you what it does not have. Only the kingdom can give you the peace that does not depend, the fullness that does not empty, the wisdom that does not need explanation. When Christ awakens in you, it does not make you more fit to survive in the world. It frees you from that need. You no longer seek to belong, not because you reject it, but because you have remembered that you already belong to another order, one that does not impose itself, that does not demand, that simply is, and by being, it illuminates everything. Ask yourself this question at each step of your path. Am I trying to improve the world or reveal another? Am I struggling to make things turn out the way I want, or am I allowing the consciousness of the kingdom to show me another way of seeing? Am I operating from the thought system of the self, which believes that everything must be fixed, defended, controlled? Or am I inhabiting the system of the spirit, which knows that everything is already contained in the divine order? This does not mean passivity. It does not mean indifference. It means action from another foundation, action that does not arise from fear, but from silence. Decision that does not arise from urgency, but from clarity. Movement that does not seek, but expresses, because the soul that is no longer seeking to change the world becomes the gateway to the kingdom, and from that gate, others begin to remember. This is the new world, the one that does not need to be built, but revealed. It is here, just behind the veil. And the veil is nothing but the belief that this world is all there is. That veil falls when you choose to see differently, when you no longer interpret from history but from being, when you stop judging form and anchor yourself in the light behind everything. When you remember that Christ did not come to give you a better destiny in this world, but to show you that you are not of this world. And from there, everything is reordered effortlessly, without war, without noise, because the presence of the kingdom is the only real power, and where that presence is recognized, the old world begins to fade. Make this practice your own. Do not try to change everything you see. Do not fight to always be right. Do not seek to correct every external error. Simply return to the center, and from there say, "This is not my world is the kingdom, and the kingdom needs no defense, only recognition. And by recognizing it, I will bring it with me. I will manifest it, not by imposition, but by radiation." Then you will understand the final teaching. Christ did not come to redesign the dream. He came to wake you up. And in the awakening, the world loses its weight, and the light that has always been there becomes your new dwelling. Chapter 10. Vibrating from the Source, How to Sustain the Christ Frequency. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. Jesus of Nazareth. The greatest challenge for the awakened soul is not having moments of clarity, experiencing deep revelations, or touching peace, love, or joy in sacred moments of silence. The true challenge is to sustain the frequency, to remain in the vibration of the Spirit when the world continues to be the world. Vibrating from the source is living as a constant channel of Christ consciousness, not as an occasional visitor to the kingdom, but as a permanent resident. It is the difference between turning on a light every once in a while and becoming the lamp that never goes out. To do this, the soul must learn not to resist the world, but not to be swept away by its vibration. It must learn not to escape the human, but to inhabit it from the divine. It must learn to walk among changing forms anchored in what does not change. Jesus did not withdraw from the world. He ate with all, walked with all, spoke with all, but he did not vibrate with the mind of the world. He vibrated from the source, and from there, everything in him was truth. Every word, every silence, every step was an expression of a consciousness unified with the principle. That is why he did not react. His frequency did not depend on the external, but on his constant union with the internal. This is what you too can live, but to do so, the soul must make a decision to renounce vibrating from history and begin vibrating from the origin. It is not about correcting thoughts one by one, but changing the point from which you think. It is not about controlling emotions, but inhabiting a frequency where those emotions lose their power. What you call emotions are often no more than signals that you have disconnected, not from God, for that is impossible, but from your awareness of God. So how do you sustain the Christ frequency? Recognize that it is already in you. It is not something you must achieve, nor something that others have and you do not. It is your natural state, hidden under layers of identification with the self. The Christ in you does not need to be activated, it needs space, and space is made when you let go of what you are not. Guard the focus. Your attention is your frequency. Where you direct it, that is what you become. If you think from conflict, you vibrate in it. If you feel from guilt, you strengthen it. If you decide from fear, you perpetuate it. It is not about fighting those thoughts or emotions, but remembering that you are not them. You are the light that observes them. And by observing without attachment, they lose their root. The Christ frequency is conscious silence, presence without judgment, love without condition, clarity without argument. To sustain it, you do not need to isolate yourself, but remain awake where you once fell asleep. This is living practice, spiritual maturity, practice neutrality. Christ consciousness does not take sides. It does not align with factions. It aligns with truth. It does not act from reaction, but from direction. This confounds the ego, because the ego needs to identify with the victim or the savior, with the strong or the weak, with the winner or the loser. But the soul that vibrates from the source is no longer defined by polarities, not because it is indifferent, but because it knows that all judgment cuts the flow of the kingdom. And where there is judgment, love cannot flow. Christ's love is total. It does not adapt to forms because it transcends them. It does not ask who is right. It asks, from what frequency are you looking at this? And if the answer is not love, then you know you have left the source. Breathe from the being. Your breath reveals your vibration. The scattered mind breathes superficially. The centered mind breathes deeply and clearly, not as a forced technique, but as the natural effect of presence. Make breathing an act of alignment. Each inhale is an opportunity to return to the aura. Each exhale is an opportunity to release what no longer vibrates with you. You do not need words, only attention. For where there is loving attention, there is Christ. Return to the center again and again. Do not demand perfection of yourself. Do not expect to sustain the frequency without slips, but cultivate the return. It does not matter how many times you fall. What matters is how quickly you choose to return. Each return to being is a victory. Each act of surrender to silence is an act of power. And with every time you choose to return, your permanence becomes more stable, your vibration firmer, your life more guided. Do not negotiate with the ego. When the frequency drops, the ego speaks louder. It tells you that you are not progressing, that this does not work, that you should return to the old pattern. But you already know that voice is not real. Your work is not to argue with it, it is not to feed it. Observe, do not believe, do not react, and it will dissolve. For all illusions need energy to sustain themselves, and you no longer give it. Remember that you do not sustain the frequency. It sustains you. It is not an effort, it is a surrender. When you stop trying to maintain it and simply surrender to what you already are, then the frequency becomes your habitat, your base, your home, and from there the world changes, not because you force it, but because your vibration establishes a new reality around you. Your relationship's clear, your body responds, your energy aligns, your direction is revealed. Everything flows not because you push it, but because the source has already set it in motion and you no longer interfere. Make this your living prayer. Father, I no longer want to maintain control. I only want to vibrate from you, dwell in you, act as an extension of you. Let everything in me be a reflection of what you are, and let my life not be mine but yours revealed. And remain, not seeking results, not looking to see if it works. Because when you vibrate from the source, you no longer need to see to believe. You are already inside, and from the inside, everything arrives. This is the secret of Christ consciousness. It is not imposed, it is not affirmed, it is not shouted, it is vibrated, it is lived, it is being. The kingdom stops being a promise to become an atmosphere, firm ground, a permanent home, because what vibrates with the source cannot fall, cannot fail, cannot be extinguished. It can only bear fruit, because the tree has already returned. Chapter 11. From channel to presence, not transmitting light, but being it. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Jesus of Nazareth. There comes a point in the spiritual journey where the soul must cross a silent threshold, one that is not mentioned in books nor taught in classrooms, but which every true awakening requires, to stop being a channel and become presence, to stop transmitting light and become the light. To a certain extent, it is useful to see oneself as a channel, a sort of instrument through which something higher flows. The soul tells itself, I am not the source, I am just the channel. And during one phase, this can be helpful to cultivate humility, to help move out of the ego that wants to take credit. However, if this thought does not evolve, it becomes a new form of separation, a sophisticated way of continuing to believe that the divine is outside, and that one is merely a passive vehicle for something foreign. Christ consciousness does not see God as something that comes and goes, nor does it think in terms of intermittent flows or spiritual visitations. Christ does not expect the light to use him. Christ knows that he is the light. Jesus did not say, I am channeling the Father. He said, the Father and I are one. That is the highest declaration, the purest consciousness, not being an instrument of God, but being the living embodiment of the Spirit. And when the soul crosses this threshold, everything changes. It no longer prays to receive, it prays to remember. It no longer acts, expecting to be guided. It knows that every step arises from presence. It no longer says, Spirit, come to me, but rather it firmly breathes, Spirit, I am. This shift in consciousness is not arrogance, it is not spiritual presumption. It is unity, it is identity. It is the understanding that what you are seeking you already are, that there is no you who channels, but only God expressing as you. But for this identity to be lived, The soul must completely abandon the idea of itself as an empty vessel. It must let go of the notion of being a separate soul that is filled in moments. It must die to the story that makes it feel like a borrowed house through which the light passes, and it must recognize itself as the lamp that has always been lit, the light that cannot go out because it was never turned off. This transition is not a change of practice, it is a change of being. It is not a new spiritual system. It is the complete dismantling of separation. It is stopping being in the service of the light to knowing that you are light serving from itself. And how does this happen? First, through recognition. You must look within with absolute clarity and declare with sacred humility, "What I have sought already dwells within me. What I have channeled, I now recognize as what I am. I no longer fear assuming the light because I know it is not mine. It is what I am in him." Second, through total abandonment of the self. As long as you wish to be the clean, efficient, useful channel, you remain centered on yourself. You still think in terms of merit. But when you empty even of that, when you release the need to be used or recognized as a channel, only presence remains. And presence does not use, it expresses. It does not enter, it reveals. Third, through surrender to stillness. When you know you are the light, there is no urgency to speak, to act, or to prove. Your mere presence is enough. Your silence is already a message. Your effortless being is already a transforming vibration. The person channels, the being radiates. And when you move from person to being, you no longer need to touch anyone to heal. Your field is medicine. Your breath is guidance. Your gaze is prayer. Your walk is affirmation. Jesus did not have to impose the light. He was the light. That is why he could say, "I am the light of the world," and then look at his disciples and say, "You are the light of the world," because he knew there is no personal light. There is only light that recognizes itself in all. This is the consciousness the world needs today. Not more transmitters, but incarnations. Not more intermediaries, but silent awakener who live from the source, not to preach it, but to be it. Try this. Instead of asking the Spirit to flow through you, breathe and affirm that you are already united with it. Not because you did something, but because you were never separated. Instead of asking yourself whether you are channeling correctly, enter the presence and allow it to express itself without interruption. Instead of trying to bring light into the world, recognize that you are the light, and where you walk, the shadow will adjust. Not by effort, but by vibration, not by technique, but by truth. This is the final point of the spiritual journey, when there is no more distance between you and God, when the soul has stopped being a vessel and has returned to being the source, not as the absolute, but as its perfect expression, not as abstract totality, but as the living manifestation of the eternal, not as the sun, but as one of its rays, conscious. And a single ray of that light can illuminate an entire life. Do not say, "Lord, use me." Say, "Lord, be yourself in me," not as a visitor, but as identity, and remain without urgency, without a plan, without performance. Because now you know that you are not a channel. You are light in form, and that form in silence reveals the kingdom. Chapter 12. The kingdom as the only reality stopped dwelling in form. The kingdom of God will not come with observation, neither will they say, "Look here," or "Look there," for the kingdom of God is within you. Jesus of Nazareth. The human mind, so accustomed to living through the senses, cannot conceive of a reality that is not made of forms, boundaries, external references, time, and space. It has been trained to interpret what it sees as the only reality, and everything that cannot be seen, measured, or explained is considered invisible, immaterial, and therefore irrelevant. But what Christ taught, what Jesus revealed through his life and consciousness, is something radical. The real is not the visible. The real is not the form. The real is not out there, but within. And that within is not a physical place, but a dimension of consciousness, and that dimension is the kingdom. The kingdom of God is not a future reward, nor a distant promise, nor a prize for the righteous. It is the only reality that exists, but it can only be lived by those who free themselves from identification with form. To inhabit form is to live in constant reaction to conditions, people, symptoms, and events. It is to live from sensory perception, where what is seen determines what is believed, and what is felt determines what is decided. The soul that dwells in form says, "This is real because I see it. This is true because I feel it." This defines me because I experience it. But the Christ consciousness says, this is illusion because it changes. This is appearance because it has a beginning and an end. This cannot be real because it is not eternal. The kingdom of God has no opposites. It does not fluctuate. It needs no defense. It does not enter nor exit. It remains. It is, and its nature is peace without cause, fullness without object, love without dependence. When Jesus said, the kingdom is within you, he was not referring to an abstract idea. He was pointing out that the only true reality is the consciousness that does not identify with form. It is the mind that has ceased to interpret everything from the personal perspective and has remembered its original nature, pure being. To inhabit the kingdom is to step out of the world without abandoning the body. It is to stop living as one who moves in a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and to start living as one who simply witnesses the unfolding without attachment, without judgment, without the need to change what appears. This does not mean indifference, it means depth. It means that the external no longer determines your center, that what occurs in the realm of forms no longer governs your peace, because you have stopped inhabiting form and have returned to the source, to the kingdom. This return is not a magical act, it is a continuous decision. It does not happen in an emotional instant, but in the constant practice of remembering who you are. When the world shouts, "This is urgent," you hear the silence that says, "Only the kingdom is real." When the mind says, "This is a problem," you respond, "This is temporary illusion. The truth is unaltered. The kingdom remains." When the body expresses pain, when the economy falters, when a relationship breaks, when a plan fails, consciousness does not return to form in search of meaning. It anchors deeper in being, and from there it looks at form with compassion but without identification. This is what it means to live in the world, but not be of the world. This is what the Christ in you desires to embody, a form that walks without inhabiting itself, a story without attachment, a character without ego, a channel that no longer believes it is a channel because it has recognized itself as presence. Make this your daily practice. No matter what appears before you, no matter if it is pain or joy, loss or gain, success or failure, ask yourself, is this that I see part of the kingdom, or is it passing form? And if it is form, let it go. Do not deny it, do not repress it. Just recognize, this is happening in the realm of the transient, but it does not represent the eternal. I am not this. I inhabit the kingdom, and from here I observe, I bless, and I remain. Little by little, the mind stops seeking validation. The body stops fearing, the emotions calm, and decisions become clearer, because you are no longer reacting from the ego, but expressing from being. This is the great transition, from inhabiting form to embodying the kingdom, from living in conflict to living in alignment, from needing the world to confirm you to remembering that you are already complete. And from that consciousness, everything transforms, not because the world changes, but because you are no longer seeking in it what only the unchanging can give you. You are no longer waiting for time to give you what only eternity can offer. You are no longer demanding from things what only being can give, and then everything that once seemed indispensable becomes secondary. Everything that once seemed urgent becomes relative, and everything that once seemed separate becomes one. Because the kingdom does not need to be reached, it only needs to be recognized. And in that recognition, the soul rests. It rests not out of inertia, but out of wisdom. It rests not from weakness, but because there is nothing left to prove, nothing left to protect, nothing left to fear. There is only being, only peace, only God, and that is the kingdom. Do not seek it in the future. Do not idealize it in another dimension. Do not imagine it as a reward. The kingdom is here, now, within you, and the only thing that hides it from you is your decision to keep believing that form is real. But you already know the real, and if it does not change, it is the kingdom. Return to it, not as one who strives, but as one who remembers, not as one who begs, but as one who surrenders. And stay there, not for minutes, but forever, because one who has stopped inhabiting form no longer fears what occurs, for they know that in the kingdom, everything is already perfect. Chapter 13, Miracle as a Consequence, not a Goal. These signs will follow those who believe. Jesus of Nazareth. In the collective consciousness, the miracle has been elevated to the status of an exceptional event, something rare, powerful, supernatural. something that interrupts the natural course of events and alters the visible laws of the world. But this widely spread yet incomplete conception reveals that the soul is still viewing from the mind of the ego. Because from the consciousness of Christ, the miracle is neither a goal, nor a reward, nor an extraordinary aim. It is the natural consequence of a state of being. The miracle does not come to convince, nor to prove that there is power, nor to reward faith. The miracle happens only where there is alignment, where thought has stopped opposing the spirit, where the heart has released fear, where identity has surrendered to what already is. There, in that terrain of pure consciousness, the law manifests effortlessly, and what seemed impossible to the separated mind occurs without strain. Jesus did not seek to perform miracles. He did not wake up each day wondering what signs he would create, nor did he expect public approval to manifest his will. His sole intention was to remain in the Father, and from that remaining the signs came by themselves, not as a spectacle, not as a demonstration, but as the inevitable consequence of lived truth. "These signs will follow those who believe," he said, "not those who struggle, not those who assert with anxiety, not those who repeat without faith, but those who believe." And believing in this context is not holding an idea, but inhabiting a vibration, dwelling in the certainty of the invisible to the point where the visible adjusts to it. The miracle is not the exception, illusion is, because what is miraculous is the natural order of the kingdom, what has always been available but can only be seen by pure eyes, by a clear mind, by a surrendered soul. The ego seeks the miracle as a goal. It wants results, proof, effects. It seeks to heal the body, improve finances, fix relationships, and while there is no error in desiring well-being, the error lies in making the miracle a goal in itself, because this implies that something is lacking, that one is still incomplete, and that an external intervention is needed to restore order. But the Christ in you does not seek miracles. It manifests them, not because it wants to, but because it is. And where being is lived as the center, the miracle is automatic, like the flower opening to the sun, like the fruit ripening with time, like the river flowing to the sea. There is no pressure, no rush, no demand. The miracle does not respond to the shout. It responds to silence. Not to desperate desire, but to deep alignment. And this alignment comes when you no longer seek the miracle, but become one with the source, and from there the miracle comes. What then is a miracle? It is the correction of a false perception. It is the restoration of divine order where the mind saw chaos. It is the visible manifestation of love where there was once fear. It is truth emerging in a place where only illusion was projected. A healed body is not a miracle in itself. The miracle is the consciousness that stopped fearing, and by doing so, allowed vital energy to flow without obstruction. A debt that is settled is not a miracle by itself. The miracle was the faith that deactivated the belief in scarcity. A relationship that is restored is not the central miracle. The true miracle was that someone chose to see with the eyes of the Spirit, and in doing so, the conflict lost its power. Therefore, do not seek the miracle as a phenomenon. Seek the kingdom, because where there is the kingdom, there is order. And where there is order, what the world calls the miracle becomes the norm. Jesus never clung to the effects. He said, "Do not believe me because of the works. Believe in the truth that I speak to you, for the work may impress, but only the truth transforms." Make this your practice. When you face something that the world calls a problem, do not seek a miracle as an external solution. Do not say, "Lord, change this." Instead say, "Lord, show me the truth that this moment hides. Show me the already existing order beneath it. Show me the kingdom behind the form, and let my mind see it." Only that. And when your mind sees it, the miracle will have already occurred, because the true miracle is not the change of circumstances, but the change of perception. Do you want to live in constant miracles? Then do not seek them. Vibrate from the Spirit and allow the truth to manifest through you as peace, as health, as provision, as direction, as clarity, as unconditional love. But do not expect results. Do not measure effects. Do not make the miracle a goal that distracts you from the presence. You are not here to pursue miracles. You are here to remember your divine nature. And that nature is miracle in itself. You are miracle because your eternal soul is not of this world, and yet you inhabit it without belonging to it. Every conscious breath, every forgiven thought, Every moment of real presence is already a miracle. And if you learn to see this, you will live in constant manifestation, effortlessly, without anxiety, without separation. Do not force what can only blossom naturally. Do not demand what can only be revealed. Simply align, simply return to the center, simply vibrate in God, and let the miracle serve you. For you did not come to seek miracles. You came to be evidence that the real is here. And where you remember, form obeys, and the world transforms. Chapter 14. Union without effort, surrender as a state, not an act. That they may all be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be one in us. Jesus of Nazareth. The ego wants to achieve union with God. It strives, disciplines itself, studies, practices, repeats, analyzes, memorizes. It wants to reach a higher state of consciousness, as if it were a summit to conquer, not realizing that this very attitude is the obstacle. For union with God is not something to be achieved. It is revealed when one stops trying to attain it. The consciousness of Christ does not work to unite with the Father, does not pray from a distance, does not struggle for communion. It lives in union because the idea of separation has disappeared. There is no one who has to surrender because there is no longer a self separated from the Spirit. Only being remains. This is true surrender, not an occasional act of giving up, but a continuous state of alignment with what already is. Most people confuse surrender with defeat. They believe surrender is stopping the fight when there is no other choice left. But spiritual surrender is not what you do when you can no longer continue. It is the way the soul lives when it has remembered that there was never anything to control, resist, or achieve. Surrender is not stopping action. It is acting without the interference of the ego. It is moving without fear, without weight, without urgency, because one no longer seeks to modify the world but to reveal the kingdom. Surrender is not passivity, it is depth. It is not indifference. It is complete trust in the invisible order. Jesus did not go through life struggling to obey the will of the Father. He said, "I do nothing of myself. As the Father has taught me, I speak." Not because he lacked his own will, but because his will was no longer separate. It was the Father's, not by imposition but by nature. And that is the difference between surrender as an act and surrender as a state. When seen as an act, surrender occurs occasionally, during prayer, meditation, or in a crisis. It is a moment, a pause, an instant of connection. But when surrender becomes a state, there is no returning to the self. There is no oscillation. There are no longer two. There is only lived unity, not understood intellectually, but inhabited from silence. From there, everything flows. The body aligns, time adjusts, energy organizes, decisions arise without anxiety, because one no longer decides from fear, but responds from being. How to live in surrender as a state. Stop resisting what is. The ego fights with life. It judges what happens, wishes things were different, creates conflict between what occurs and what should occur. That friction is suffering. But the surrendered soul sees everything as a teacher, as part of the perfect plan that its mind does not need to understand. And by letting go of interpretation, it returns to peace. Let go of control. The ego wants to have everything planned, anticipated, guaranteed, and controlled. But that is not living. That is surviving. The surrendered soul no longer needs to control because it trusts in the higher wisdom that inhabits it. When something does not go as expected, it does not panic. It breathes, waits, listens, and knows that the hidden order will reveal itself, not because it has to understand, but because it has surrendered. Live from the now. Surrender as a state is only possible when the soul stops living in psychological time, the past which blames, the future which tames, and returns to the present moment, where there is no judgment, no expectation, no struggle. There is only God being. When you are in the present, surrender is not an effort. It is natural, because you are no longer divided. You are united, not with words, but with presence. Embrace what comes without losing center. Surrender as a state does not mean that you will like everything. It means that nothing will have power over you. You may feel sadness, discomfort, but you no longer define yourself by them. You no longer act from emotion, you act from vision. And that vision does not come from what you think, it comes from what you are. The soul that has surrendered its will has not lost freedom, it has elevated it. For it no longer chooses from desire but from truth. It no longer asks, "What do I want?" but what wants to express itself through me. And when this becomes constant, surrender is no longer a moment. It is the ground you walk on. Make it your practice. Do not say, "Today I will surrender." Say, "Today I will live as if there is nothing to resist." And observe how everything changes. When something bothers you, do not ask to understand it. Just say quietly, "This too belongs, this too is part. I do not oppose, I receive." And remain without reacting, without trying to change it. Simply inhabit the moment and let being do what it must, for it always knows, and you no longer disturb it. This is the fruit of true surrender, a peace that no longer depends, a clarity that is not forced, a union that is not interrupted. For where there is no resistance, only God remains. And where only God remains, the soul no longer acts on its own. It acts with Him, in Him, as Him. That is living in surrender as a state, not as an idea, but as nature. Not as a practice, but as identity. And from there is nothing to do, only to allow. And in that allowing, the kingdom manifests, not as a promise, but as present reality. And you, without effort, inhabit it because you and He are no longer two. Chapter 15. The Christic consciousness does not react, it reveals. I will no longer talk much with you, for the prince of this world is coming, and he has nothing in me. Jesus of Nazareth. There is a language that does not use words, a teaching that does not need letters, a power that is not expressed in volume but in presence. This is the language of the voice without voice, and it is from this state of consciousness that Christ in you acts, speaks, and moves. Jesus did not respond to everything he heard. He did not correct every mistake. He did not need to impose his truth in every conversation, because the Christic consciousness does not react, it reveals. It does not align with the form of attacks, nor is it contaminated by another's fear. It simply remains, and in that permanence, the truth reveals itself. In the world, reacting is common. We respond quickly with defense, justification. The ego lives in a constant state of alertness, as if something must be defended at every moment. But all of that comes from one root, the belief that you are separate and therefore must protect yourself. The Christic consciousness has no such root. It does not feel separate. It does not feel vulnerable. It does not live from threat. And that is why when something comes, a conflict, a judgment, a challenge, it does not react. It observes, waits, and from the silence, reveals. That revelation is not always with words. Sometimes it is with a look. Other times it is with the absence of a response or with an action so simple that it seems invisible, but whose vibration transforms the entire field around it. Because truth does not need to impose itself. It only needs to be held, and where it is held, it illuminates effortlessly. The soul that lives in Christ does not rush to explain. It is not in a hurry to correct. It is not easily offended because it no longer lives from the wound or the persona that must be validated. It lives from the consciousness that already knows who it is, and because of that, it has nothing to prove. This is what it means to live in the voice without voice. It is not being silent out of shyness. It is being silent out of wisdom. It is knowing that truth does not need noise to assert itself, because its strength lies in its root, not in its volume. Jesus demonstrated this constantly. Before Pilate, he remained silent. Before the crowds who doubted, he did not justify himself. Before the disciples who did not understand, he did not become impatient. He did not react because he had already transcended the need to defend what the Spirit never loses. What happens when you decide to do the same? First, the ego will shout that if you do not react, you will lose something. It will make you feel weak for remaining silent. It will push you to speak, to explain, to demonstrate. But deep down, you will know that one who remains without reacting has more power than one who controls the discourse. Because the consciousness that does not react reveals the frequency of the kingdom, and the kingdom does not defend itself, does not justify itself, does not enter into the world's game. It only shows itself when someone dares to not follow the logic of fear. This is the practice of living spirituality. When someone speaks to you from their shadow, resist the temptation to lower your frequency. Remain, not from passivity, but from the silent fire that sees all, understands all, and because of that, does not need to wound. The reaction of the ego, the revelations of the self, and you are here to reveal, not to fight. Do the practice. In every difficult conversation, in every crossroads, in every thought that pushes you to defend yourself, ask yourself first, am I about to react or to reveal? If you are about to react, stop. Breathe. Enter the voice without voice. Listen to what silence is saying and act from there, not from impulse but from clarity, not from emotion but from vision. Because true vision is not about speaking well. It is about speaking from peace, and sometimes from that peace no words are spoken at all, and that is already teaching. The soul that has remembered its unity with all no longer needs to respond to every stimulus. It emits its frequency like a beacon, and where that frequency is held, chaos surrenders, tension dissolves, conflict disarms, not because a discussion has been won, but because the kingdom has been sustained, and the kingdom is not imposed. It is revealed. This is true spiritual authority, not imposing your voice but inhabiting the voice without voice, not giving explanations but embodying clarity, not correcting the other but remaining so deeply aligned that the other feels invited, without words, to also remember who they are. Jesus did not shout to transform. He simply lived so deeply united with the Father that his life was a constant revelation. Every step was teaching, every silence, direction, every presence, transformation. This is what the Christ within you wishes to embody, not only elevated thoughts, but a vibration so stable that your life becomes the voice of the Spirit without the need for sound. Make your day a living expression of this consciousness. Do not react to appearances. Do not enter into the world's game. Do not lose your frequency to prove something. Simply remain. Hold the vision and let your presence, more than your words, reveal what cannot be taught. The truth that does not shout but transforms everything, because the Christic consciousness does not impose itself. It does not move by urgency. It does not lose itself in explanations. It simply is. And in that being, the voice without voice speaks, and its message is eternal.